Good morning to all of you.
Good morning, sir.
So we are meeting for the last lecture today, last session, where I would, at the start, I will give a summary of under this particular topic, meditation model of myself. We'll try to summarize most of the ideas that we used under mindfulness meditations. After that, I will give you the technique called light meditation. I will describe that. So after the break, we can have a question answer session. So any other questions which remain in your mind regarding these meditations, we can have a small sharing of ideas, small discussion. And then towards the end, we will have our last quiz. I think I already mentioned that the two of the quizzes you can leave out because there were difficulties, I know, connectivity and all. So out of all the quizzes, we will leave the quizzes with the lowest marks for each one of you. Two quizzes with the lowest marks we will leave out from the calculations. And then I will highlight about the topics that should come in our final report submission. So that is the plan today. So we will start with the summary of meditation model of basically yourself, right? Each one of us need a model to think of oneself. Think of oneself for the meditation purpose. For the meditation purpose, which parts of which we have already discussed. So what I'm going to do now is to put them all together and give an improved diagram or a model which you can use for your meditations. Remember we discussed our senses. There were 5 senses plus the mind also as a sensor. There were altogether 6. 5 sensors to connect with the external world, and the mind also considered as another sensor, and therefore altogether we had 6. Then we were having definitions of contacts that happen at each of these sensor. I will put the names we used. We identified that the eye plus the color form plus the eye consciousness, which is the mind appearing in the eye, we call it eye consciousness. These 3 together, when they act together, we call it an eye contact, a momentary activity which happens in a flash. Then it was similar for the ear. Ear plus, actually this should be sound form plus ear consciousness gives ear contact. Then nose plus odor form plus nose consciousness, nose contact. So throughout our day, while we are living, these contacts are happening, and they happen so fast, and we used to neglect them, and we used to feel the effect rather than thinking of the process of what happens. Then for the tongue plus flavor form plus tongue consciousness. is a tongue contact. Body plus the touch form plus body consciousness is the body contact. Same for the mind. And what touches the mind is kind of a mental object. Well, although these sensors can operate individually, one of these 6 sensors are actually more important than the other 5, which I think obviously you guessed, right? It will be this one. The mind as a sensor plays a bigger role than each one of these other 5. Actually, these other 5 are there to connect to the external world. And the connection between external world and the mind is made by the other 5 senses. So therefore, to improve our thinking about ourselves, we can modify this model a little bit, this idea, separating this one, mind, because it plays a more important role, which I will highlight in a moment. Other five contacts I will put onto one side. The outputs of these contacts, their outputs go to the 6th sensor, the mind. On this side, you will have the inputs taken from the external world. Mind can't directly take an input from the external world because it's not directly connected with the outside. It's inside. Other 5 are connecting to the outside. So inputs collected from the other 5 will be forwarded to the mind. So mind plus this other 5 can generate or trigger a mental object in the mind. The other 5 can directly trigger a mental object which is already stored in the mind. And then mind will act upon that mental object, and the mind consciousness will appear and a mental contact take place. So for every input taken from outside, the mind will be acting upon that information. That's why the mind is special out of these 6. That's why I separated the mind. Maybe I can give you a little more illustrative diagram to show this. Let's consider the first one, the eye. We discussed this diagram earlier. I'm using the same diagram again, where the eye, it comes in contact with the color form, and the mind appears in the form of eye consciousness at that point. Remember the color form when it came in contact with the eye here, eye consciousness appeared, and immediately that becomes an eye contact. With the eye contact, it generates non-physical things such as feelings, perceptions, and volitions, which we drew like this. The eye contact happens, instantly feelings, color perception, and basic volitions about this color. Volitions are kind of simple decisions. They are taken based on, decide upon the color. So at the eye, when eye contact happened, there were these physical things. These two belong to a physical form actually. Physical form. Then these things, they are all non-physical. Out of that, so you can see all the five, for example, starting from this as number one, then number two, feelings, three, perceptions, and four, we can say volitions, and consciousness. Maybe I could call this two. Anyway, it's okay. The fifth one we will count as consciousness. What are these five? What did we call them? They were called five. Hope you remember. There were six sensors, and we are now taking one sensor here, which is the eye. Only one out of the six we took. And when that eye operates, at that moment, at that exact moment, we have these five kind of ingredients. Right? Five ingredients, some of them are physical, some of them are non-physical. Right? In fact, only one of them are physical. All other things are non-physical mental factors. And therefore, every time a sense faculty operates, there are all these five factors directly activated at that moment. Only momentary. After that, what happens to them? So this is a momentary generation of these mental factors. But then these things will be forwarded to the mind again for further generation of thoughts. Right? So the activity happening in the eye is very momentary, and immediately what is generated from that contact will be passed onto the mind to form a mental contact based on this information. Hope it is clear. Now, although I took the eye as the example, it is same for the ear. The moment an ear contact happens here, these feelings, perceptions, and basic sound volitions are generated, and they are immediately passed to the mind. And the mind will have further thinking done upon the information coming from these things. Okay. So what are these further thoughts that the mind will generate upon these things? That we will discuss now. Okay, so as I mentioned, I took the eye as an example, but this could be any of the other five. So these things generated will be passed onto the mind. So immediately after the eye activated, then the eye activity will close, will fade away or will vanish. Then mind will be activated based on this information. So these things will be passed to the mind to recollect a mental object related to that. So the feelings, color perceptions, basic volitions done on the color they will trigger a previous memory of some mental object or objects in the mind, and that is the mental object which comes in contact with the mind now. Okay? So the mental object will be recollected or retrieved from the mind based on this, and of course maybe modified on this. After that, a mental object generated that way will be in contact with the mind. So in the model of myself, you will have to slowly become mindful of these activities happening, although they happen very fast. When you train the mind with sufficient level of concentration, of course that comes with the practice, there will be a time that you will be able to grasp and comprehend these things happening as and when they happen. At that moment, as and when they happen, your mind will be capable of becoming fully aware of these fast activities. Okay. So what happens when mind comes in contact with the mental object? Mental consciousness or mind consciousness will appear. Then the combination of the mind, the mental object, and the mind consciousness, these three makes a mind contact, and immediately with the mind contact comes out, which is what I call mental contact. Then comes mental sensations. Remember, these are physical sensations or physical feelings. These are mental perceptions about the mental object. MO means mental object. Some perceptions about that mental object will appear. Plus what? There will be certain decisions based on that, some mental volitions also. Right? So it looks similar here, isn't it? Here also we had these feelings, perceptions, but these are basic information. These are basic. These are more detailed, not only about the color. These things are only about the color, only about the colors. Colors seen by the eye. These are not about only the colors, these are about the whole mental object. So by this time, you would have identified using the color mental objects. Right? It could be a tree, it could be a table, or it could be anything that the mind remembered based on the information given by the eye. So volitions also take place. Volitions means further decisions or further thinking take place on that information. Okay. Now what? What will happen next? I think you can guess. Will the mind go back to the eye again to take another sample of color from the surroundings, or will there be further processing of what has been collected as information from the eye, that processing within the mind? What do you think will happen? Okay, everything you can generate, all the information you can generate cannot be done in one volition, one mental volition. Therefore, the mental activity will be repeated for further volitions, further perceptions. So it's a kind of, now the eye has vanished now. At that moment, the eye activity is not there. Therefore, I have erased that diagram here. Eye activity is momentary and the information generated has been passed now to the mind. Of course, mind activity is momentary for a short time, but again, it will, any sensations, perceptions, and volitions generated by the mind, they are initial now, initial things, and they will be looped back like this to make another mental contact. So mind consciousness will appear again and generate these things again for the second time. Right? These things means mental, a second mental contact happens now. This is number one mental contact happened earlier. Second mental contact happens. Again, these three will be generated. And again, that refined things will be passed for a third contact. So likewise, multiple times, the thinking will go on. For once you took the information from the eye, but multiple times the mental loop will operate and many mental contacts will take place based on that information collected. And every time a contact happens, you know, these volitions, perceptions, sensations, they are generated. And they are looped back. They are taken for the next contact. So likewise, one eye contact can generate multiple mental contacts, and minimum of 4, but that can be more, right? After that, it may go back to take another sample. After n contacts, it may go back to take another sample from the eye, like this. But before that, there is this internal looping of processing that information collected from the eye. Again, eye is an example only. It could be information collected from the ear, or it could be information collected from the nose, likewise. Right? For all the other 5, what I said will apply. So you can see an eye contact generates, the moment the eye contact happened, all 5 aggregates were there. They were passed once, and n times this loop will run based on these 5 aggregates. And more aggregates will be generated while this loop is running. So for example, suppose we just saw a particular set of color in a picture, and in order to process all that color information, to understand it fully, that process of cognition we call will take multiple mental loops to run. This is what I'm trying to say. Okay, then which means a loop 1 will generate these things, loop 2 again, loop 3, loop 4. Likewise, multiple loops, mental loops now will generate. By the say nth loop, these decisions, mental volitions will be more complete, more refined, and more strong. More strong decisions will be taken to take action based on the that eye contact. Right? So what I'm trying to say is, for one eye contact, there will be multiple times the mental loop will run. Every time the perceptions, volitions will become stronger and more refined, And finally, they will be strong enough to make an activity, do an activity. Okay. Hope it is clear. Right. Then after this nth time, once it is very strong, the decision may be, whatever the decision that comes out here could be, okay, I need to look at it again. If that is the case, if that decision came, then the eye contact will be activated once again. Eye consciousness will be generated, and these will be generated once again and will be passed to the mind for the second time. So this is like a second sample. The mind will go to the eye to take a color sample and then process. Then go to the eye again and take a second color sample, process it again. Go to the eye again, take it for the third time and process again. Likewise, between eye and the mind, information will, activity will happen like this. But at any moment, if the mind decides, okay, I don't need to go back to the eye, I would like to activate the nose at this moment, then nose consciousness will be generated and this will end. The activity, joint activity with the eye will end, and the mind will be now trying to sense from a different sensor. But that is also, that decision is also coming out as a volition after some time. Therefore, the mind is paying attention to the eye for a short time, then maybe the ear. Suppose you are watching TV, the eye and the ear are heavily used. Between them, the mind will be switching. And happening, these activities happening in very, very rapid pace. Okay. Well, we will simplify this by modifying our previous diagram. I mentioned that I will help you to define a model of yourself. So previously we defined, we came up with this diagram, you remember, visual form or color form. Color form and visual form are same. Eye consciousness appearing, which is the mind appearing in the eye. And then perceptions, sensations, perceptions, and volitions will be generated. They are basic ones. Pass to the mind. This is sensation, perception, volitions, basic ones regarding the visual information. Pass to the mind here. And same way, although I took the eye as an example, it could happen through any of the other 5. But of course, one at a time, because it's a sequential activity, happens one after the other. So when the mind is taking a sample, visual sample from the eye, all these other 4 are deactivated. Okay? All other 4 are deactivated. When a sound sample is taken from the ear, all other 4 are deactivated. So one at a time, only one at a time. Okay, when they appear in the mind, let's say this S, P, and V, sensation, perception, and volitions, could be coming from the mind also. Suppose all other 5 are not active. You are not sampling anything from the surroundings. You are sampling mental objects from your own mind, which means your own memory that can also come in when others are not active. So mind can be an input to the mind as well. Okay? Then each one of these 5, we will discuss these 5 first. Each one of these 5 will generate SP and V. Of course, any one of them will be passed to the mental contact that I mentioned earlier. So this plus mind consciousness or mental consciousness will appear. I will call it MC. And then this will happen multiple times, generating further sensations, mental sensations, perceptions, and mental volitions. And when these volitions are strong enough, then they can go to generate activities. Right? What are the outputs of the mind? Remember, there were three. What are the three? There were physical volitions, verbal volitions, or mental volitions. Okay. Physical volitions will be decisions regarding bodily activities. They will be passed to the muscles. Verbal volitions are thoughts relating to speech or generating sound from the vocal tract. Therefore, that will be passed to the vocal tract. This is generating further thoughts. Rather than doing physical or verbal activity, you want to think more on whatever the information collected here. Therefore, you pass mental volitions to the mind itself. So it's looping to itself to make new mental formations. So new memories, new mental objects will be formulated and remembered here. Those mental formations can go through this loop, and come back to the mind, and will make this mental contact. And this is the mental loop I mentioned earlier. So this loop will be running. This is the loop which we call the mental loop. Like that. So the mind is looping to itself, and that's happening internally. Multiple times this will happen for every input taken from another file. So every time this contact will also generate SPV. This will further make it strong. This is a mental loop we were using strongly to develop the meditations. So this is a model that I wanted you to know, so that your meditation and your day-to-day activities could be understood using this model. So in summary, one input, one contact taken from here. Let me say just one contact taken from here makes this inner mental loop to run n times. And after that, decision could be to take another sample, maybe from a second input. Then again, this will run n times. So like that, it continues. So by now, from the start of today, when you got up in the morning, how many times these activities would have happened? Okay, uncountable, isn't it? Billions of times these things have happened in rapid succession like this up to this time. Now it's about 8:40 a.m. So from the time you got up to now, these things have been active and have run billions of mental loops in your mind. Right? Therefore, a meditator will develop sufficient mindfulness and concentration. Remember, mindfulness plus concentration, both, in order to follow these activities as and when they happen, so that the self-understanding, understanding everything happening here becomes possible with practice. That is, so this is a model which I mentioned. You can remember yourself, and as you do more and more meditations, you will find this perception of or understanding of this model will become more and more clear to you. Maybe at the moment everything may not be clear. As a theory, it may be clear, but as an experience, there may be a lot of unknowns at the moment in your mind. But keep practicing. Even if this course is over, some of you, I hope all of you would decide to continue these meditations in your life. And then this model you will understand very clearly as the time goes by, as the development happens in mindfulness. Okay, so that model summarized what we discussed earlier as six senses here, 6 senses. Then these things are like physical form, consciousness here, eye consciousness, and these 3. So this is 1, 2, and 3 here. So altogether there are 5. What are those 5? So every eye contact would have generated. Remember when we discussed mindfulness meditations on mental objects, we were discussing about hindrances. We were discussing about sense faculties, 6 of them. And then we were discussing about these 5. Okay. So all are in this same picture now. Sensations are, hindrances are happening here within the mind. Hindrances will arise. So therefore, you can use this as a summary. Give me a minute. Okay, sorry for the interruption. Okay. Right, so we will move forward from here into another meditation. I think the 6 senses, hindrances, 5 aggregates, they are all together in one picture here. You can use this more and more as you meditate first. Then about this light meditation, few ideas about that we will discuss. Okay, you see a kind of a cupboard, and you can think of the inside of the cupboard. What will be, what will you see while the cupboard is closed? While the cupboard is closed, what do you perceive as the situation inside the cupboard? Okay, well, think of the situation inside the cupboard right now, while the doors are closed. So your mind may perceive that, well, the inside may be dark. Right? Darkness may be perceived by the mind. There may be objects, but of course, if you take the mind to inside the cupboard, you might not be able to see the objects because the mind perception or cognite it as darkness there. Right? How did we know? How did we know that inside the cupboard there is darkness? Same way, if you take your attention down here, down to the chest area, maybe you can close the eyes for a moment now, little exercise. Close the eyes. Then focus on, take your attention to the inside of the rib cage. Inside the rib cage, inside the chest. What is the light level there? What is the color you can see there? Or what is the amount of light? Is it white or black or what color? And then you can open the eyes. What is the color or what is the level of light that you could perceive inside the chest? Well, you can send the answer in the chat if you like, or else you can speak up. It's only a mental exercise. What did the mind say about the amount of light present inside the chest area? Okay, just type an answer in the text. So single word answer is enough. Okay, I get answers now. Darkness. Okay. Well, maybe the question was so simple that maybe why you had a delay in answering. It's fine, right? Okay, I get a lot of answers now. All saying darkness. Quite correct, isn't it? Because that's what our mind will say. Thanks all who send replies. Yes, the mind will say it's dark there inside the chest. Then one step further, we can think, how did the mind arrive at that conclusion? How did the mind arrive at that conclusion? You don't need to type that as an answer, just think. Right? How did the mind arrive at the conclusion that inside the chest there is total darkness? Have the mind seen inside the chest earlier in your life, at least once? Or is that decision purely based on the physics that you learned? I think it's purely based on the physics, the rules of physics that you learned in class, isn't it, in theory? So when something is fully enclosed, according to physics, there can't be any light there. So total darkness must be there. So although the mind has never seen inside the chest, at least for once in our lifetime, still it has these volitions, isn't it? It has volitions about what it would be able to see based on the theories, based on the mental perceptions, which means the mind can never see outside, isn't it? Mind can never see outside without the support of the eye. Of course, to see outside, nose can't support, ear can't support. To see the outside, only the eye will have to support the mind. If there is a place where the eye cannot go because it is enclosed like our chest, then the mind will be doing like some guesswork based on previous theories it has learned and arrive at a conclusion. So what I'm trying to say is that for the mind, darkness or brightness or light is only a perception, not a real experience, only a thought which it has learned over a period of time. Think about it, right? Because the mind needs the assistance of the eye. So based on the previous assistances it has got, you answered that question, but you have never seen inside your chest to be sure that it's dark. So it is a cognition process of the mind to conclude like that. So actually the rule of the mind is that it is not bound by the physical laws of physics. It is the laws of physics that comes to that conclusion that the mind, the inside the chest, it's darkness. So that conclusion came based on the laws of physics. But the laws of physics are not the laws of the mind. For the mind, you can go beyond, right? You can generate, because the darkness is also a perception or cognition due to a perception in the mind. You can perceive light. You can perceive light in the chest. That's an ability the mind has because mind is not bound by the laws of physics. This is the basis of light meditation. Basis of light meditation is you use the mind, mental volitions to generate the perception of light inside the body, inside the chest, inside the head, everywhere. Because the light, as for the mind, light is a perception. Darkness is also a perception. So you can apply any perception you like in a meditation, which goes beyond the laws of physics. Okay, we'll have a short break. After that, I will highlight that meditation and we'll do it. Have the short break there.